Welcome back to another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. Today, I'm with a guest, James Guzman. He's the host of the Borderless Podcast, a pioneering podcast that was talking about, residency and citizenship programs in Latin America all the way back in 2015. So he's been around a long time. I've been listening to your podcast for a long time, and it really helped me early on in my journey. So, James, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot for having me on. So, where are you right now?
I'm in Guadalajara.
Guadalajara, okay, not too far away. Yeah, very cool.
And you in San Miguel?
I'm in San Miguel de Allende. It's about 3.5 hours away. For those that don't know, been here around 8 years now, and I'm now fully expatted out down here. I got friends, family, a wife, and all that stuff down here. So this is my my hometown now.
That's awesome. And this is random, but when I used to hear about San Miguel de Allende a couple of years ago, I would always call it Allende. But as I've spent more time, Mexicans just call it San Miguel. They don't even say Allende.
Yeah. I mean, St. Mike, St. Meek, they have different names and stuff like that. But there's different San Miguels in different countries. But yeah, in Mexico, people know it as San Miguel. But you just say that, that's fine.
Yeah. It's like, voy a San Miguel, no sé qué. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Allende comes from Ignacio Allende. Ignacio Allende is, kind of like George Washington of Mexico. And he was from here, and he had a house in Centro. You can go to see his house, and that's why they just added the San Miguel de Allende from Ignacio Allende.
That's awesome. And so I think maybe to get started, the best thing to do would be give a little bit of an introduction to the audience, who you are, talk about the Borderless podcast and some of the stuff that you've been involved with and how you got to living the expat lifestyle.
Okay. Well, so I first moved out of the States 2008. Around then. So I was in the Navy, and I was on the USS Baton for 4 years. And while I was there, I got involved in real estate pretty young. I bought my first house when I was 20. And this was in the early 2000s, or mid 2000s. So we're talking about 2005, around there. And 2004, 2005. And I thought, this was really the way to wealth. You just continue to buy houses. They were extending credit like crazy to a lot of people. And so I just continued to buy real estate and, rental houses and stuff like that. Going to cash flow meetups, Robert Kiyosaki is a very popular author and stuff like that. But like so many people at that time, I really overextended myself a lot. And that was a really waking up moment for me, because I lost a ton of equity in my in the rentals that I had in the United States. And, I wasn't as strategic as I should have been. I mean, I was 21, 22. So, I didn't have a whole lot of experience, that kind of stuff. And so I just basically had, I wasn't able to keep up with all the rental property that I had bought, and I had overextended myself on. So I just did a kind of a strategic default with the rental properties that I had, and I used the GI Bill, and I went to study international business in Madrid, Spain. So I lived there for 3 years, and that was great. It was just phenomenal. Studying international business, also economics. There's an economics professor that's kind of world famous. His name is Jesus Huerta de Soto, who was a student of Rothbard, and so that was nice being able to listen to his lectures and also hang out with all of his PhD students and stuff like that. I didn't actually do the PhD program. I thought about it, but I was like, what am I going to do with the PhD in economics? I mean, are you really going to teach? I don't really want to teach. So I felt like, you could learn it, read books and stuff like that. And you don't really, I didn't feel like the actual title was going to help me at all. So, and then after that, I got a job as basically a commodities broker in Barbados. Peter Schiff is kind of a popular financial analyst. He used to be on TV a lot, not so much anymore. He's right now, I guess he's most known for being kind of a crypto bear, maybe the biggest Bitcoin bear. But I really learned a lot from him in 2008, learning about the Federal Reserve and the economy and stuff like that. So after I got out of college, I got a job with him, and I was one of the first handful of brokers that we started Euro Pacific Bank out of. It was actually out of St. Vincent, but we lived in Barbados, and then they since then have moved it to Puerto Rico. And that was okay, but there were some other opportunities that came down, and so I ended up moving to Acapulco, and I sold real estate there. I wrote for what used to be a financial newsletter, and yeah, so that people started to get to know me and things like that. And what I would do is I would post my what I would write. I was getting paid to write articles for this financial newsletter, and I created my own blog, Borderless Blog, and would just repost it, a couple weeks after on my own blog. Started to get my own email audience. Then I had a friend of mine who was also down here. When I moved to, I got out of Acapulco. I was there for about 2 years, and then I moved down here to San Miguel de Allende, and I met a friend of mine who moved out at the same time, and he happened to be a voice talent and has decades of experience in the radio, and that's Jonathan Lockwood. And so we started the podcast together because he already had a setup. So it was pretty easy for us to do that. That was early days in podcasting. Not a lot of people were doing it back then. And so we were doing once a week, and we were doing it pretty regularly. And I was also doing a lot of YouTube videos, and I was writing more back then. And yeah, so I came here. I started doing real estate. I worked with Coldwell Banker here in town, and then I just started doing affiliate marketing, things like that. And yeah, since then I've done a lot of things with real estate here. I was I had a vacation rental company, and I also sell health insurance and property insurance for expats and for anybody that's down here. So really anywhere actually. So yeah, that's what I've been doing now, and I'm pretty much settled here, and yeah, loving life.
That's awesome, man, and thanks for that summary. There's so many little pieces there that I could use as like jumping off points, but we might as well start with the first one, which is that you said you studied in Spain under a professor that I wouldn't be able to recite the name, but you said that he learned from Rothbard. And so most people might not be familiar with who Rothbard is. So I assume you're talking about Murray Rothbard from the Austrian school, right?
Yeah, Murray Rothbard, who was the direct student of Ludwig von Mises, and from the Mises Institute is what he was founded. And there's really only two students of Rothbard that are active at all, and it's Jesus Huerta de Soto is his name, and Hans Hermann Hoppe, who lives in Turkey. Those are the only two students. And yeah, so De Soto's is interesting. He also has a big insurance company, and he teaches. He's written several big books, on economics, and a lot of people come from all over the world to study with him there. And he started this program there at a public university. I mean, the guy is loaded. He drives around like a gold Bentley, so it's not like he does it for money, but he just enjoys teaching this program that he pretty much just created at a public university.
Very cool. And I can sort of see a little bit of a sort of pathway in terms of how you went from sort of studying Austrian economics, which was much less known at the time, to maybe that introduced you a little bit to Peter Schiff, and maybe you applied to a job with him through that. And then I could see also how that would have led you early into crypto, because you were having crypto guests on your podcast in 2015. But
Yeah.
how did you first hear about Peter Schiff, and how did that come about, getting a job with him 15 years ago?
Yeah. So honestly, so Ron Paul, he was Ron Paul's financial advisor, and like I said, in 2008, I was once this had happened to me where I had misjudged what to do in the real estate market and misjudged the market in general. I went back to the drawing board, and I was trying to figure out what the hell happened. And that was at the same time Ron Paul had his presidential campaign, and Peter Schiff was talking about a lot of things. He was talking about the Federal Reserve and a lot of this stuff. And so I really, really dived into all that, the housing market and how it's, the business cycle and all that. And so that's when I really listened to his stuff a lot, learned a lot from him. And when I got out of college, I said, I just want a job with him. So I called into his radio show. I went to his office in California. I went to his office in New York. I talked to his brother. I talked to people that worked for Europe Pacific, and I did whatever I could. I just wanted that job. And so eventually I got it,
And I totally remember watching Peter Schiff actually more back then than I do now. I know he's still kicking and talking about gold and all that, but back then when it was really like audit the Fed and the Ron Paul and everything, yeah, I was really into that. And I totally remember everything was like Euro Pacific Capital, like buy your gold and silver with us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Shift Gold, it's called now.
Shift gold.
Yeah.
And so I guess that means that you've been a real estate agent or been involved in the brokering of real estate, selling of real estate internationally for a long time, talking about it, investing about it, and in a lot of different jurisdictions.
Yep. Sure. Mm-hmm.
So, like in the Caribbean, like in Barbados, St. Vincent, etc., and then now in Mexico. And I think it's like a deadly combo when, because it's something I think about too, like with the My Latin Life podcast or platform we have, is that, maybe could be looking into doing something with real estate in Latin America in the future. What opportunities are you seeing? And yeah, talk to us a little bit about maybe what makes it different investing in Latin America and the Caribbean.
Well, it definitely can be more challenging. The game is completely different than people are going to be used to in the United States. So I assume that a lot of people that are listening are from the United States. And so, you have the 30-year fixed mortgage. You also have a lot of tax deductions and other types of things that go along with that 30-year fixed mortgage that's very low. You're not going to get that kind of loan in Latin America. And so, certainly not in Mexico. You can get loans, but for the most part, it's a cash market. The loans are going to be, 7, 8, 9% interest. They're going to be 10, 15 years. You're going to have to put a lot down. So, the real estate market in the United States is very manipulated because of the fact that, it's not really rational for a bank to give just anybody a loan where they put down like 3% or 5%, and then they're paying 3% interest or whatever it is now, for 30 years. That's it's not what you're going to get in a regular like healthy market. So anyways, so down here, there's different things that you can do. Normally you have to have cash, or at least you have to have access to some sort of private money. And you can use a property in Latin America if that's it's a place that you're thinking about living. You can use it to get residency, depending on the country. You can use it as a place for an address outside of the country that you can use for a variety of reasons. And then that's one thing that I liked about the vacation rental business, is that you can basically use it to come down half the year, a couple months out of the year, whatever. And then when you're not here, you can rent it out, weeks at a time, months at a time to other people, especially if it's in tourist destinations and places that people like to go. So you can, make money on that. And you could do it for immigration purposes or other types of, let's say, tax purposes or something like that. And so, yeah, that's basically what I see as some of the good things about having real estate in a different jurisdiction than where you might be now.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is becoming more relevant than ever. You've probably seen that just sort of in the post-COVID world in the past year or two, the popularity of second residencies and second passports has grown dramatically, the interest in doing it, and therefore the interest in buying real estate internationally. And then that also kind of leads people to that same sort of line of thinking, like, oh, I'll buy it, use it as an address, but then also rent it out on Airbnb. So you were really, really early in this. I know you're not doing Airbnb as much anymore, but you were the first person like having like Airbnb guests on your podcast and stuff like that back in 2015.
Yeah, and it's what's cool about it is that, especially with the whole, so another thing that I'm not sure if your audience is familiar with, but it's called PT theory, perpetual tourist or prior taxpayer, or they have all different things that the PT stands for. But so the idea is that you have different flags in different countries, so you have different assets in countries that that are good for that type of asset. You have bank accounts in countries where they have good banks. You have residency where that is going to behoove you for tax reasons or immigration reasons. And so you kind of strategically set up your life in that kind of way. And so that doing the vacation rental game is interesting in the PT theory, because you could basically plant a flag with an investment property there. Another thing that's great about it is that if you have a business, you start up a company that is, a vacation rental management company, then pretty much everything that you buy for your house, it's all part of the business. So it's all tax deductible. Nothing's in your name. It's in the name of your company, which gives you other layers of protection. And so, basically, you could have a house that's not in your name, that you can use to build a residency and save taxes. And so it's a great kind of strategic business.
Definitely a lot of important tactical stuff in what you're saying. But I think it's also would be cool to talk a little bit about the PT movement, the flag theory movement as well, because I think actually a lot of the new generation coming up of, people watching Nomad Capitalists and stuff like that, they might not be familiar with the PT movement and some of the early sort of eras of this idea. So there was that, you probably know, there was like that one American guy who wrote the book, Your Freedom or Your Life, something like that. What's it called?
It was Grandpa.
Sorry?
Grandpa, I believe is
Grandpa?
his name. Yeah, that was his, how he wrote using that name.
Here we go. Your life or your freedom. Anyway, I'll try to find the book, but maybe you could just talk to us a bit about what it was like in the early days with the PT movement. Talk a little bit about what it is. I guess you did, and like sort of how it's evolved over time.
Yeah. So it was actually a theory that was put together a while ago, and W.G. Hill and some other people. I mentioned Grandpa's this guy that used to write under this pen name, and
sorry to interrupt. I'm thinking of Harry Brown, who wrote Finding Freedom in an Unfree World.
Unfree World, sure. Yeah, Harry Brown. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was that time period. I don't know that he really pushed the PT theory. I can't remember. But yeah, I mean, it was that crowd for sure in that time period. There's actually a book called PT. And it was a time when it was a lot easier to do a lot of this type of stuff, because they had bearer share corporations, and there's a lot, there wasn't as much technological surveillance and things like that. And basically the idea is that you would use the system is set up the way it is, and we know that a lot of companies pay very little tax, a lot of rich people pay very little tax. These laws are on the books, so why not utilize those tactics yourself? And so, like I said, you could strategically look at, and so again, I should go back and say the flag is about, boats. Okay. And at sea, different flags, different boats will have different flags depending on where they are, where they want to dock, and that kind of thing. And so you can have several flags that you use at a different time. And so that they were using that, and the original 5 flags was the business flag, passport or citizenship flag, the domicile residency flag, assets, and then what they called playgrounds. And so you would have, just to give you an example, you'd have your citizenship. See, this is one thing with Americans that you have to start with, because basically you're screwed from the beginning, because if you have an American citizenship, then you have to pay taxes everywhere in the world, or you have to file taxes at least everywhere in the world. no matter where you are. I mean, and so the idea of the PT theory was that you would have a citizenship flag and then you would have a residency flag somewhere else, so you wouldn't have to file taxes at your citizenship country. But if you're an American, you have to do that. So that's why a lot of people have ended up giving up their their citizenships to the United States. And so the idea is you have your citizenship, you have your permanent residency, and another in a zero income tax jurisdiction, and then you'd have a place where you do business, which you incorporate, and which has good business laws and that kind of thing. And then you would have where your assets, meaning like a bank jurisdiction where you the banks there. A lot of people use Singapore or some places in Seychelles or whatever, things like that. And then the last one was playgrounds, and playgrounds is a place that is inexpensive and that you enjoy being. And, there you're basically always a tourist. So, you have no business there. You have no residency there, no nothing. You're just passing through all the time, and you spend time there, and it's inexpensive and you like it. And hopefully it has little to no sales tax. And so that's kind of the original setup. Now, people have gone a lot into more online stuff where you would put your servers. So you'd have a server flag, you'd have, other things, where you have your email flag and, different things like that to get a lot more. A friend of mine, Christoph Habermann, he's a German guy. He's gotten a lot more into, more complex into the flag theory and written about it. He's putting together more, PDFs and things like that about that. But, another thing I would add is that it's, in my, the way I see it, it's gotten a lot harder. It's hard, it's harder to pretty much there's no privacy in the financial system anymore. There's no privacy online that you can really hide or, keep your anonymity and stuff like that. It's very tough. I mean, there are different things that you can do, but for the most part, it's a lot harder than it used to be.
Yeah, thanks. And that's a really great summary. And so, the general idea is to sort of diversify or internationalize your life into various jurisdictions such that no one jurisdiction has complete control over you. Because, these situations happen over and over again, whether it be, Venezuela or more recently in the Ukraine or things like that, where if you're just 100% tied to a country for your income, your assets, your banking, everything like that, that's a rug that can be pulled away from you. And I also wanted to sort of clarify what you said regarding sort of like the residency flag. It's a bit confusing because yes, for Americans, it's going to be a strategy that's executed on differently, but it still applies. Just sort of diversifying. But I guess the general idea is you want to be a tax resident of a country where you do not earn your income. So, and you'd be a resident of a territorial tax country, ideally. So you'd be a resident of in Latin America, that might be like Guatemala, Nicaragua, Panama, something like that. And you're a resident of that country, but you're going to earn your money somewhere else in the world. And since you're a resident of a territorial tax country, that sort of extra territorial income wouldn't need to be reported in many situations. And yeah.
Yeah. And there's also a guy named Harry Schultz that popularized it. I think he originally came up with the idea. And it's basically in the 80s and 90s. So that's why I thought that the vacation rental business kind of, aligned well with that type of thing. So, when you hear, it's not mentioned a lot, but like you said, when you hear nomad capitalist and a lot of, global wealth protection and, Bobby Casey and all these other type of people, that's basically what they're talking about is perpetual travel or theory.
And that's why it's so good to have you as a guest on the program, because you can kind of help tie like the old generation of like PT flag theory guys to the new generation of people where it's almost just like normal people now who are either young digital nomads or they're just old people looking to retire. And they're just sort of concerned about, okay, I want to live in Costa Rica. I want some jungly vibes in my life, but I have a 401k and I have like shares that are vesting and this and that. And like, how do I like manage this whole transition? Um, so we said a couple names. I thought it'd be maybe useful to give people, because you're just such a probably an encyclopedia of this stuff. Like people that if people want to go back and read the history that they could look up. So you mentioned that there's the PT Perpetual Traveler book, which was written by W.G. Hill, and that's a classic. There's Freedom in an Unfree World by Harry Brown. That's a classic. Harry D. Schultz, who wrote the Harry Schultz Investment Letter, and I know he had a couple books that talk about sort of PT concepts. You mentioned you have a friend, Christoph Haverman, something like that.
Yeah, Haverman. Yeah, it's German.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he does most of his stuff in German, but he does have an English website as well. Tax Free Today. Yeah, I've had him on my podcast. Yeah.
Tax Free Today. Yeah. And then who are some of the other like OGs in this space that people could look up?
Oh, Bobby Casey. That was the global wealth protection guy I just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
I used to so the financial newsletter that I said that I wrote for it was the Dollar Vigilante,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah. So I don't really recommend that, but I mean that's one of the ones that recommend that newsletter. But that's one of the ones that was originally into all this type of stuff. Obviously, Doug Casey, and what was the Doug Casey? I forget the name of his. He had a publication that so I know you had the Casey report, but I think he also had another one. I can go look. There's so many people, and I've had a lot of them on my podcast too.
Yep.
Let's see if I
Simon
can find
Black.
some. Simon Black,
Sovereign
of
Man.
course. Yep. That's another one. Let's see. Yeah, I have to look here for a second. So, I mean, those are some of the big ones, but yeah, I would say those are probably big. Another one that I say he didn't talk about PT, but Richard Maybury was also one of the people that were in that kind of 90s libertarian camp. He's still around, but he wrote a book called The Clippership Strategy. He actually wrote a whole series of books that were made to homeschool children. And he wrote one called The Clippership Strategy. And like I said, although it doesn't specifically talk about international living, what basically it boils down to is he was saying that when there was the gold rush, they made these ships that would travel the quickest possible ever from the East Coast to the West Coast, right? Because they had to get to California. And if they got back with the gold, that's the people that got back the quickest made the most amount of money. And that changed the economy a lot because you were able to obviously arrive in that place that, arrive in the East Coast with the gold first. And then when everybody else would come, the prices would go up. So you'd want to get there first, right? So it's kind of like with inflation and that kind of thing. But he described the Clippership strategy as living in a place that he calls in the book sinkholes, which are areas that are stifled economically for a number of reasons, or maybe the money spigot doesn't get there, right? So, obviously there are places where, understanding the boom and bust cycle and, fiat currency, that when you have different stimulus and different things like that that are given to the public or given to the top, that money goes somewhere, right, first. And that's what bring mostly in different specific big cities. You could say like it mostly goes to New York or Los Angeles, something like that. Washington, D.C., obviously. But the idea is that you would get under some spigot of money, and then you would live in a place where that money doesn't normally arrive, so that the prices would be, lower, stifled, and you're not living in a place with high inflation, but you have access to that kind of money. So he was talking about doing newsletter subscriptions and stuff like that you would be able to do that and live in another place. But now you can do so many things online and use the same strategy. And so I think that has a lot to do with the PT as well.
Right. So kind of like earn dollars, spend pesos.
Yeah. Geo arbitrage. Oh, another one obviously is Tim Ferriss. He wrote about geo arbitrage and that kind of thing. Um,
Hmm.
all even
4 Hour Work Week.
yeah, the 4 hour. Even the guy that wrote The Truth, Neil Strauss, he had a whole book about PT theory.
I was going to ask you
Emergency, I
about that
believe.
too. Yeah,
Hmm.
Emergency, the book that came out. I read that. He got St. Kitts citizenship. This would have been early on. This was definitely like a decade
Hmm.
ago. So well before Nomad Capitalist even came out.
Hmm.
Neil Strauss, who was like a rock music reporter and all that, he went and sort of looked into the five flag theory. You must have basically already been in the space by the time that book came out. Did you ever have any interaction with Neil Strauss or any of the other guys that we've mentioned?
Oh yeah, a lot of them. I mean, I know him well. No, Neil
Mhm.
Strauss. No, I don't know anything. But yeah, sure. A lot of the other people I know him.
For sure. And yeah, and another thing you were alluding to regarding the Clipper ship, and actually you mentioned ships before. And this is actually one of the analogies I use to sort of relate it to people. Is how like an extremely high percentage of boats or ships operating internationally are operating either under a Panamanian flag or a Liberian flag. And so you have something like 10% of the world's shipping fleet runs a Liberian flag. Obviously, the Liberia, the country in Africa. But these ships are never landing in Liberia. No one's like Liberian in the crew. It's not owned by Liberians really. It's basically a flag of convenience. So Liberia and Panama are the two most popular for shipping, which people take advantage of for the favorable sort of laws and incentives that those jurisdictions have for registering ships. And so what I'm getting at here, excuse me, is how you could actually think of your own life as if you were a ship, and and how you could register yourself uh, theoretically in Panama or in Liberia or somewhere else where it's a favorable jurisdiction, and you're running around and doing different stuff, and you're just sort of using the most favorable jurisdiction available to you, right? Because the way it generally works or has worked for hundreds of years is just you're born in the Netherlands, cool, like everything you do is in the Netherlands. You're born in Canada, cool, everything you do is in Canada. And when you take that sort of higher level perspective, that eagle eye, you say, look, like this ship does not need to be registered in Canada. We can register this ship in Panama and save money on taxes and have greater access to the high seas, so to speak.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and it just makes sense, and especially nowadays, it's so easy, and I think that setting up these types of things is easy. There's a lot of information online. Another thing I wanted to add is that another thing with ships is a lot of people talk about false flag, right? A false flag event. I think a lot of people have heard of that before. That was
Yeah.
ships. They were pirate ships or other type of ships that would roll up the flag of another opposing country or fleet or whatever, and then they would attack somebody to make it think it was somebody else. So that's another kind of
Right.
thing with ships. But yeah, I think that and also it's just like Neil Strauss was talking about, emergency. That was the whole idea. Is he wasn't doing it necessarily for tax purpose, but he was doing it for in case of emergency, right? So that's another thing is that if you have, I think that we've seen that in the last 2 years that having a second residency, citizenship, home, whatever, is going to behoove you if anything happens. You never know what can happen in the coming years. We see a lot of things, economic degradation, supply chain problems, energy shocks, different types of crisis. If you have different options, then that's going to be very helpful coming down the road. Just to try to think ahead to just have some different options for that type of stuff.
Definitely. I think everyone agrees that having options and having multiple passports, residencies is net a good thing. Like there's very little downside to having multiple citizenships. The problem is it's almost And maybe a couple of years ago, actually, even like Canadians or Europeans might have said, "Oh, I don't see the point. I already have the best passport." I think now, even largely, those people have kind of gotten over the hump and have said, "Okay, yeah, obviously, multiple passports is a good thing." Even if it's acquiring a quote unquote worse passport. So, maybe I have Canadian buddies that are entitled to Jamaican citizenship or whatever it is, Greek citizenship. And before they might have said, "Oh, you know what? Like, it's not really like gonna, make a impact on my life. Really, like, what's the point? Just another thing to worry about." Whereas I think now, everyone's kind of like got, for the first time we've seen like travel restrictions in our lives, things like that. And so I think now people are starting to get like, yes, um, like net, like all else being equal, it'd be better to have multiple citizenships. Um, and then the question really becomes, okay, cool, like everyone is down to have multiple passports, but now it becomes sort of like a question of effort, and like, is it easy to do? How much is it going to cost me? How much time do I have to spend on the ground? What are the physical presence requirements? How long is it going to take? Things like that. And so I think that's a lot of what we're focusing on in My Latin Life. And I think what a lot of the community can focus on is we don't really need to convince people anymore. We just need to find the countries that make the most sense for people's situations, and just make it like easy enough where it makes sense. Cause not everyone can spend, the 6 months plus a year needed to like be naturalization track, for example.
Yeah. Well, it's a no-brainer if you haven't looked into it yet and you have some sort of heritage that you can trace back to somewhere like Italy or Ireland, Sephardic Jews out of Spain. There are other ones that if you can trace your heritage back, not too far back, then you can get a Lithuania is another one. Then you can get a citizenship pretty easily. So that's I would say that if anybody has anything like that, definitely look into that and get that right away. There's no reason why you shouldn't do that. Other than that, then you have you have to pay for it. Now, a lot of these programs are very expensive. Over $100,000 that you pretty much just have to donate. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I don't know how many people have 100 grand lying around, but there are options. Also, recently they've been talking about cracking down on those because Joe Biden was saying that they're basically being used by Russian oligarchs, and so they need to shut them down, right? And so we'll see how those continue to go. But the United States government looks like they're going to be leaning on the countries that are offering those, and so we'll see. And so other than that, you just kind of have to go and wait. If you have a girlfriend or a spouse from another country, then you can go ahead and get married in another country or something like that. You can look into that, whatever their citizenship or heritage is. You might be able to do something like that. And also, having kids, people call it, birth tourism. I guess in the United States they
Mm-hmm.
call it anchor babies. But going somewhere to have a kid and then you automatically get residency there. Here in Mexico, you can do that. You can come down if you have a child here. You get the parents get permanent residency. So, so there's different things like that. And then once you get permanent residency, you have to wait for a while. Depends on the situation. And then you can get citizenship if you want. Although, you probably, Mexico is not a tax haven, so might not be a good place to get a citizenship. So it just depends on your situation.
Yeah, and I actually had another guest on my program, Martin Toomey, from the offshore consultancy group, and he, we talked quite extensively about the Mexico program, um, and it actually is a pretty good program. Um, Question for you: so I assume you have either Mexican residency or citizenship at this point.
Yeah, residency.
Residency. So
Mhm.
you've been there like 8 years. You must be pretty much more or less able to apply for naturalization.
Yeah, well, I will soon, but for a long time I was living just on a tourist visa,
Hmm.
so for years and years.
And have you done any other residency programs in Latin America or internationally?
Me, no, no. I'm a resident here. I live here. Maybe I'm not the best example of, of the digital nomad thing anymore because I'm just kind of like, especially with 2020 and the all the restrictions and all this type of stuff. I just don't like. I just kind of like dug my heels in here, and so
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, obviously, I can move around internationally and stuff like that. For the most part, I stay here. I don't. I'm like I said, I'm more in the expat than digital nomad camp now.
Definitely. No, but and as I've mentioned, your podcast episodes early on were extremely pioneering. So you have episodes from 2015 about residency in Uruguay, in Paraguay, in an episode where you compare different Central American options. You have a
Mhm.
Panama episode. So you were really covering this stuff like really early on. And I remember before I even really like started my digital nomad journey. I was listening to these episodes, and it was helping me basically plan my future. And I'd say, like, is there anything here that makes sense? How can I sort of start getting the pieces aligned and start preparing to potentially do some of this? And so I don't. It's tough because I never know how much to like say or give away, but um, I have quote unquote like looked into the Paraguay one. I've gone down there, Panama as well, Mexico as well. So I've been actively involved in a lot of these programs. In Paraguay, you had for the Paraguay episode, you interviewed this guy, Lonnie. What's his last name? Lonnie McRory, who was like kind of like the most active guy in the Paraguay for expats group. And I think it was pretty much the only like full length interview he'd ever given.
I didn't realize that. I just did another one, and because they're yeah, that's Paraguay. Barry Cooper from Never Get Busted. I had him
Uh-huh.
on recently,
Uh-huh.
and he set up a Paraguay thing as well. But yeah, I remember that one from a while ago, and a lot of people were because he was saying he was also like criticizing people in Paraguay, and a lot of people were like, "Why is this guy? He's trying to help people get residency, but at the same time, he's like talking shit about the country." But anyways.
I noticed that recently when I was doing research for this episode, and I was like, "Wait, what?" And then I looked at the website, and he had like a whole form for people that would maybe want help with the Paraguay residency, and I was like, "This is hilarious." Uh,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, we even did
I
one. We did one of the first ones was on renouncing. We did a whole episode on how you can renounce your United States citizenship with a guy who did it, Glenn Roberts, who's I believe he's Paraguay. Yeah, and he had no other citizenship,
yeah,
and
the
he just
famous
renounced it.
stateless guy.
Yeah, the same. I don't think
He
it's
was
on.
like,
I was just looking at the feed, and they erase it after 100. They automatically erase your episodes. So I think that one's erased. I mean, I still have it in my archives, but it's not online anymore.
yeah, and I'm looking at his Wikipedia, the man without a country. And he was
Yeah.
like one of the only people that was the US like ever allowed to be stateless. Because typically, if you want to renounce your US citizenship, the requirement is you need to have another citizenship already to fall back on. But this one guy, he basically got Paraguay to like write him a letter saying like, "Oh, you can like live here stateless, blah blah blah. We'll give you like not a Paraguayan citizenship passport, but they give him some sort of like Paraguay stateless travel document." And so, if anyone is interested, sort of in like the history of statelessness, which sort of plays in the history of PT and renunciation, things like that, this Glenn Roberts situation is probably one of the unique cases that people would want to look at.
Yeah, and so you're basically like, so you're turning yourself into a refugee. I mean, right? So if you don't have a citizenship, um, there are actually millions of people that don't have citizenships on the planet. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
all over the world, people that just never get things like a social security number, or passport, or citizenship, or they don't have any dealing with nation states, right? A lot of indigenous groups and things like that. And the UN actually sees this as a humanitarian crisis, and they consider them like refugees, right? Because they want to get these people banked, right? So the unbanked is a big crisis that they see, and so they actually had a whole meeting about this, and they have come to the conclusion that everybody has a right to a travel card. So you can get some sort of a travel card from the UN, even if you don't have a citizenship that will allow you to travel. But
Mm-hmm.
as we all know, it depends on your citizenship where you get a visa. So, as an American citizen, you can come to Mexico and they'll see you're an American citizen. They'll give you, well, they used to just automatically give you 6 months. Now it's been less a lot of times. But since you're from the United States, you can come right in. If you're not, or if you don't have any citizenship, then that's going to be tough to really go anywhere. You have to apply ahead of time for a visa using your UN travel document. But technically, you're supposed to, you have a right to this travel document, a worldwide travel document.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely a couple cases. There's indigenous communities. There's people in like the Middle East where the like people from like Kurdistan and stuff like that, where maybe like the country doesn't recognize minority groups, things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, actually, I remember when I was in Paraguay in Asuncion, I met a guy who basically was following in Glenn Roberts' footsteps. And this is a guy that's off the radar. Like he doesn't have, press. You wouldn't be able to look this up, but I met a guy that he was in Paraguay. He gave up his U.S. citizenship prior to being accepted as a Paraguayan national, but he was living there and bought real estate there. And so he was stateless for like a year until his Paraguayan citizenship finally went through. And then he became Paraguayan, and which was quite a feat in of itself. It was like a double feat, the stateless thing, and then also the fact that getting the Paraguayan citizenship is actually pretty hard. It's easy to get the residency, but it's pretty tough to get the citizenship. I imagine you, being in this for so long, anecdotally, you've seen lots of people from Western countries that have successfully gotten passports in Latin American countries. I'm guessing in Mexico and elsewhere.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Mexico to a lesser extent, but yeah, I know people that have gotten them here and other places. Yeah, absolutely. Residencies and citizenship, and you see different programs come and go. You see a lot of fraudulent stuff. So you got to be careful and you got to jump on it if the government is offering some specific program. A lot of times they'll just do it for a short period of time or something like that. But yeah, there's a lot of people that come down here and do it.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen a lot of programs come and go over the years. What do you think is the future of these residency programs? Do you think that they're going to start going away? Do you think they'll just sort of up the requirements? Um, it's actually been, everything's changing around a little bit, but a lot of things have been pretty steady state for the past, say, decade or so. Rentista visas and pensionado visas and things like that. What do you see the future holds for Latin American residency programs?
Well, that's a big question. Each country is obviously different. I would say that honestly, I think that over the next 10, 15 years or whatever will probably be harder for Americans to get citizenships, permanent residencies, or even visas to a lot of countries. I think that we'll probably see, the United States not have the kind of the prominence that it's had in the past, and a lot of countries, they're not going to be giving the kind of white glove treatment to U.S. citizens as they have before. They might not even let them in at all. I think a lot of not everybody out, not all non U.S. people have animosity towards Americans, but a lot of them do. And so I think that a lot of countries, so like for instance in Brazil, the United States government started putting on more restrictions for Brazilians to go to the U.S. So Brazil just did the same exact thing to U.S. citizens, right? So you could see a lot of that type of stuff, tit for tat, and So yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think that the U.S. government is going to, you know, they're going to be tightening. They're not, they're going to want people to, they're going to use the new technology and digital surveillance and all this type of stuff to stop uh, tax avoidance and people trying to use these types of things, strategies individually. And so, yeah, I think that you also have to look out for that. And, like I said before, all these different types of programs as far as bearer shares and, basically having private banking that no longer exists. So I think that's going to be probably, even more extreme in the future is probably the way that they'll be able to see where you are, where you're spending your money, if,
Mm-hmm.
what if you're receiving money, if you have some under the table business, they'll be able to see that if it's all digital. And so I think these are kind of the trends that we'll see.
Yeah. And so, if you don't mind me asking, so you knew about all these residency programs early on, and some of them, like Paraguay, is like unbelievably easy, right? So I'm curious, like, is there any reason that you didn't do any of them?
Yeah, I just didn't care. Honestly, I was. I mean, no, I just was a tourist. You know what I mean? So I just did everything under the radar. And I mean, I didn't have a bank account for years. I mean, now I do, but I didn't have. I just did all cash and basically would just, you know, use tourist visas everywhere.
Which honestly, you know, is a decent way to go. When you look at some of these residency visas, you start thinking, oh, like if I actually want to spend time here, maybe a tourist visa is better. I was just looking today at the Costa Rica residency program, and you have to pay in. It used to be $250 a month into the healthcare program. Apparently, like just last month, it went up to $500 a month. So you're spending 6 grand a month, 3 or 6 grand a year, paying into the healthcare program in Costa Rica just to basically maintain the residency. Some people like it if they actually live there full time and make use of the program, I guess. But if you just want to maintain the residency, it's not the best. So yeah, it's really like case by case. You got to kind of figure it out. But I honestly just find it extremely intellectually interesting. The idea of like setting up all these bases, um, and just kind of like feeling like a James Bond kind of guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and so like over the years, have you like sort of personally helped a lot of people move to Latin
Yeah.
America? I'm sure you've like, so what do you're sort of like, they hear about you through your podcast or your writings, things like that, your email list. And then I guess you have a network of fixers and lawyers and real estate brokers in lots of
Mhm.
different countries. And you sort of like play the connector or middleman.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was doing several different countries in the past, kind of concentrating on Chile, Colombia, Brazil, and Mexico. Those kind of were the big
Mm-hmm.
ones.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Puerto Rico, for the Act 2022, which has now changed names.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, these days, I'm pretty concentrated on Mexico. I mean, I do strategy calls with people if they're moving internationally, no matter where they're moving.
Mm-hmm.
But these days, I kind of concentrate on Mexico. I just think that as the it gets so populated, the podcast and you know expatriation kind of field these days. There's so many people doing it. I thought it's better just to concentrate on where I am. So that was my idea of niching down.
Yeah, makes sense. Um, So yeah, so how do you do it in Mexico then? I'm pretty familiar with it. Obviously, I'm in Mexico. I may or may not have one of the residency visas. Um, so like what like do you have like sort of your own in-house team, or do you just sort of refer people to a lawyer, or if someone comes to you, like how do you proceed?
Well, yeah. So I definitely, I've been in, if it's real estate, I mean, I can give people advice on real estate throughout the entire Mexico, and really Latin America is pretty much very similar. And if they're here, if they want to buy something in the area here where I am, then I can personally help them, or I have a kind of a network of people that I work with. That depends on the situation, depends on the client, what they're looking for. That we can set something up. As far as insurance, I'm personally a broker, and for property insurance and health insurance. And I know plenty of accountants that I also within my network that I can recommend for people, either if they're more of international digital nomad type, or if they're just strictly coming down to Mexico to live. Those are kind of two different things. And so, I have people that I can recommend for that. A lawyer that helps with immigration. And, I've noticed that a lot of people, so I had a specific kind of concierge program where people would come and I would meet them at the airport, or I would send a car to get them. And I basically spend 3 days with them. I do all these things that I talked about with you. I help them open a bank account, stuff like that, and help them find a rental or a house, do kind of a house tour with them, and also just kind of bring them around. And what I found is that, a lot of people that explore these types of ideas or they see it on the internet, a lot of times they just want to come and have somebody hang out with them and show them around. And it's, they just want to like have a couple of beers and talk to you about that, because they don't really have a lot of people that they know that they can explore these ideas with. So I found that a lot of times it's just, a lot of that people want to connect, bounce ideas off of somebody that knows
more
about
exploratory.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel like the concierge thing is like a good model? Does it kind of work for you? If not in person, like online? Because I find a lot of people, they just, they're not big planners, or they're not, they just want they're just in a position in their life where, they'd rather someone do everything for them. And so I'm kind of getting into this more, putting together like a package, whether for, a couple $1,000, and help them plan their trips. And for some people, it might, they have different purposes. But I found a lot of people, it's kind of with a retirement spin, but different cases.
Yeah. Well, here's what I'd say is, don't let, anybody, even myself, tell you what might be a good idea or not. I mean, there's all kinds of things that I've known friends of mine that have done things that I've thought were way too expensive or nobody's going to buy. But especially if you have some good videos or some marketing, whatever, it's people have been successful with things that I didn't think would get off the ground. So, it's very creative, with a lot of the online stuff, whether it's maybe it's a course, or maybe it's an in-person class, or maybe it's an online class, or maybe it's a PDF, or, just try to think to how, what people would want in that type of situation, your exact avatar of the person that's looking for that, how much they're willing to pay, and stuff like that. So it's it's kind of endless what you can come up with.
No, for sure, for sure. All right, I have a couple pretty specific Mexico questions that'll hopefully be high value for the audience. So the first one would be around fideicomisos, which I'm sure is like a trust vehicle that needs to be set up in Mexico if you want to buy real estate within 50 kilometers of the water, of the ocean, or within 100 kilometers of the border. And actually one thing, and so that's kind of like the land restrictions in Mexico, is that foreigners cannot buy land within 50 kilometers of the ocean unless they set up this fideicomiso structure, which is my understanding. And then what's cool about, say, San Miguel, or buying land sort of somewhere in the center of the country, is that you don't need to set up the fideicomiso, which would have basically lower overhead costs and lower annual ongoing maintenance costs. Because in San Miguel, you could just buy in your own name.
Correct. Yeah.
And so,
is there a question or?
Well, that I guess is a big sort of pitch up, but yeah. So I kind of wanted to maybe ask a couple different questions about sort of buying real estate in Mexico. I think basically anyone that's come to Mexico in the past 2 years has seen a lot of like opportunity in real estate, and pretty much everyone I know is talking about putting together like a little real estate fund and getting some Airbnbs going or buying a second home, things like that. Um, I guess I was going to ask you about the fideicomisos, but then I kind of explained it. But
Everything you said was correct. Yeah.
everything I said was correct.
But honestly,
What
I've set up a lot of these
yeah.
fideicomisos. It's not a big deal. It's just a trust. You have to go to a bank to set it up. It's, I don't know, $700 or something like that, and $400 a year, and that's it. And you keep it. It's not technically a trust for tax purposes, but that's getting kind of in the weeds. But yeah, it's fine. But yeah, actually, a lot of people have some idea about 100-year lease or something like that, and that's not true. You can come down here on a tourist visa, and you can, here in San Miguel, you can buy a house in a week, and so yeah, no problem. You don't need to set up anything.
So let's talk about real estate. I'm just gonna kind of, it'll be a little bit bouncing around, but okay. So let's just say you did do a fideicomiso. $400 sounds pretty good. I thought it was more like 1,000 a year. So what if you then become a Mexican citizen a couple of years down the line? I imagine it would be a bit of a headache to sort of unwind the fideicomiso and then put the property in your own name. Have you ever dealt with that?
I haven't done that, and those were prices from a long time ago. I haven't set one up for a while. I used to set them up a lot when I lived in Acapulco, but
Mhm.
since I'm here, I haven't set up one in a long time. But so that you might be right. It might be closer to 1,000 by now. Probably is. And honestly, I don't have any experience bringing it back into somebody's name, but I don't see why it would be too big of a problem. You just get a lawyer to do it. I don't. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, just a little cost. I mean,
Yeah.
well, there could be like real estate taxes or something like that, fees.
Well, I guess that's something to keep in mind. Here in Mexico, is that if you can say that your house is your primary residence, there's different ways that you can prove that, but you can only have one primary residence in Mexico, and then you do not have to pay the capital gains tax.
Hmm.
So
And I think if foreigners buy real estate in Mexico, they would have to pay property gains tax. But once you become a temporary or permanent resident, I believe then that homeowner's rule would apply, and it would be
yeah,
capital gains free.
yep, yeah, because you can't say that's your permanent residence if you're not even a resident.
Uh huh. And so we know, obviously, as citizens, you have greater ability to buy real estate, oceanfront and whatnot. Do you know of any differences between temporary and permanent residents? Do you know if there's any perks or benefits that a permanent resident would have that a temporary would not? Maybe around that capital gains things or other things that you've seen before?
No, not at all.
So it'd be the same.
Yeah.
Okay. And so how easy would it be for me to buy a property in San Miguel? So let's just say you pitch it up for me, you say, hey Vance, like I have this 100K Casa Colonial in the center of San Miguel. Do you
Well, you're
want
not
it?
getting
And I
you're not
say
getting one for that price in the center.
round number, round
Yeah.
number. And then so I'm like, sick, I'm down. Like just tell me how to send the money. What does that process look like? How long is it going to take, etc.?
Oh, if you couldn't come, is
Well,
that
I
what you're
mean, I'll
saying? If
come
you
if
weren't
I
able to
have.
come?
I'll come if I have to, I guess. But yeah, just like tell. So let's just say I want to buy some in San Miguel. I got the money in the States or Canada. What happens then?
Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, if you didn't want to come, then we'd have to get a power of attorney, which is easy enough. And there's ways that can be done from afar, even if you're in the States. And then once you have a power of attorney, then, then your agent could set, so if I was here helping you, then I could do the whole process with the lawyer, get it signed. And yeah, you set up an escrow, and that's, you put a deposit, and then they have the closing, and then then the full amount is deposited, and then that's it. I mean, it depends on who the seller is. If you had the money in the US, you can, and they have a US account, you can just send it right, wire it through the US. A lot of even Mexicans have US accounts, and they like to be paid directly in the US rather than here or in another country. It doesn't matter. And so, yeah, it just depends on the situation, where the money is, who's paying, and what the seller wants to do. But yeah, it's pretty easy.
Okay.
For people that are interested, maybe they don't know. about how things work here. I mean, it's very similar to the U.S. You have Coldwell Banker and Remax and Sotheby's and all these big companies, and they operate here just very similar to how they do in every other country. And so yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Maybe some things that are a little bit different, but for the most part, it's very similar. Like for instance, that one thing that's different is they have to sit there and read to you the closing documents. The lawyer has to read out loud, and you have to sit there and they read the whole contract, which is kind of annoying. They don't do that in the U.S. You just sign, a big stack of papers, but that's part of the law here. So, and they also you have to sign it exactly like your signature is. Like they're very particular about your signature. That it has to look like your regular signature. So,
Mm-hmm. And is it like relatively easy to get the money transferred down? Do you have issues where like, Wells Fargo doesn't want to release the money to Mexico?
it can be a problem. I've had depending on how big the wire is. If it's a big wire, you might have to actually go to the U.S. and do it in person.
Uh-huh.
So it just depends on the amount and where it's going and stuff like that. There's a lot of banks are weird these days. They red flags all over the place. So
Dude, maybe I'll be engaging your services at some point in time because
yeah.
yeah, and I would love to do it maybe somewhere. And I think about where could I do it where I don't have to do the Fideicomiso. I guess it's not the biggest deal at the end of the day, but it's kind of nice not to worry about it and the cost and stuff. So anywhere sort of in the middle. So it could be San Miguel, Guanajuato, Guadalajara, maybe down in Chiapas, like San Cristobal or something, maybe even Merida. So there's definitely a lot of like good spots in the center where, it's a somewhere that's livable, growing, should be a good
Do you
store of
live there? Do
value
you
in
live
Mexico.
in Guadalajara? Or are you just visiting?
Well, I do more of like a digital nomad thing, so I bounce around quite a lot. As I mentioned, Mexico is kind of one of my bases. I don't have like a permanent lease or a place, but it's something I'm thinking
You like it there?
more and
You
more
like
about.
you like spending time in Guadalajara?
I like Guadalajara. I like I need to explore more of the center. But yeah, I like Guadalajara a lot.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's pretty good. I have one of my friends. I do weekly broadcasts with a friend of mine named Hervoya. He lives there.
Oh yeah.
He has a radio show, and he lives in Guadalajara. I'm on there once a week. So yeah, I like it there. Also, my brother-in-law lives there, so I'm pretty familiar. Been to Bariachi a lot of times, and the what's that one street with all the bars on it? It's pretty fun. So
Chapultepec.
yeah, Chapultepec. Yeah, that's it.
What's mariachi?
Bariachi is a giant mariachi bar. It's like, and they have
Makes
really
sense.
extravagant mariachi shows. It's pretty fun. Yeah,
Where
we've
is
spent.
mariachi?
Yeah, yeah. I'd recommend it.
Okay, Casa
I have some
Mariachi.
people I know there, so we get front row seats, and so you just like sitting right by the stage, and they have this really extravagant mariachi show the whole night. It's a lot of fun. Everybody gets into
That's
it.
that's funny. I didn't know about this. All right, so I'm gonna ask you. Another one of my main concerns about buying real estate in Mexico as a Mexican resident. And I know, like, you're not a tax lawyer. I'm not a tax lawyer. This is all just sort of like philosophical thoughts. But okay, here's the thing. So let's just say you're a permanent resident in Mexico, right? If you're, this is a country with residency based taxation, it's not a tax haven, as you mentioned. And so if you're spending more than 6 months a year in Mexico as a permanent resident, you probably, in a lot of situations, should be paying tax. Now, a lot of expats and people on these permanent residency visas probably aren't currently paying into the Mexican tax system. Who knows? But here's the thing is that if you layer in, and you can kind of fly under the radar, Mexico has historically been pretty chill about these things for temporary and permanent residents who spend more than 6 months of the year. But here's the thing if you layer on top of that, buying a property in Mexico, especially in your own name, and of course, you'll pay the property tax and things like that associated with the house. That's fine. No one's trying to avoid that, obviously. But I feel like you're sort of putting a bigger target on your back for the authorities, who would then might start to think like, like what else does he have going on? So he's paying property taxes. He's spending over 6 months of the year. Shouldn't this guy maybe be paying like income tax or have other stuff going on? You know what I mean? Aren't you sort of like increasing your exposure to the system there?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, in level of risk, but I don't know how risky that really you could consider that to be. Everybody, the property tax is pretty straightforward. It just kind of, it arrives at a piece of paper and you just go to the bank and pay it. Nobody's really paying attention or watching who's paying or who isn't paying their property, like what you're doing. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. And I think that, although Mexico isn't where a lot of places like the United States are, as far as regulating all this type of stuff, they're definitely trying. So they'll get there eventually. So I guess we'll see. These kind of, you have to just think about your situation and whether you want to take certain risks or not.
Yeah, and obviously, like, there's no like clear answer here, and the response is always going to be sort of like it's up to anyone. But it sort of makes me think that, like, going back to sort of flag theory and stuff like that, if you did wanted to get real estate in Latin America, maybe you should consider getting that real estate in somewhere that's at least like a territorial tax system, so that
Mhm.
as you're sort of like entering that tax system in a more significant way, your name is written down to a much greater extent than it would be as as a non-landowner. Like, maybe like have that Mexican permanent residence permit, maybe even spend more than 6 months there if you want, I don't know. But if you were to get real estate, maybe just get that property in Guatemala or Panama or something like that, just to sort of keep those risks down. And I think that's something that people don't really think about. And I think, sort of advice or thoughts that people aren't going to hear anywhere else than, a conversation with guys like us.
Yeah, and I mean, and obviously, I mean, that just the immigration aspect or the tax aspect is one part of it, but I mean, also you want a place that if it's somewhere you're going to be spending time, a place that you like, in a place that you like, you know what I mean. You don't want to just because it's maybe it's more uh, akin to your tax strategy. If it's in a place that you don't want to live, then that's no good. Or in a place that it looks like real estate is declining, and that's another thing you have to think about is where some up and coming places are, because hopefully you can make some money on it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We can change topics, I guess. Like, I know it's kind of like a tough one, but it's just something I wanted to throw out there. See if you had any thoughts on it. But yeah, it sounds like you're just kind of like, yeah, like whatever works.
With what? With real estate?
I mean, yeah, just there's no answer there, but it kind of makes me weary about like getting real estate in Mexico, or a concern I have. But it's tough. It's tough. Maybe if you do it not in your own name, it's a bit of a different situation. It definitely would change the dynamic
Yeah. So you're worried about the hacienda coming after you because you buy a house in Mexico?
a little bit, or just like you're just more on the radar.
Well, that's for sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just like having a business somewhere, having a property somewhere. You're definitely not the same as just some tourist or digital nomad passing through. So
Thinking about like your ties holistically. All right, we can move on to a couple of just like fun questions as we kind of start wrapping up. Um, so you lived in Acapulco for several years. Now you live in San Miguel. Uh, Acapulco is one of the only beach towns on the Pacific side that I haven't been to yet. What did you like about Acapulco, and do you miss the ocean now?
yeah, yeah. So when I was there, I was in my mid 20s. All right. So now I'm like in my late 30s. So,
Hmm.
so I guess mid to late 20s when I was there, like 26 or something. And so I mean, I was a different person, and it's like party town. It's like Miami with less rules. Just like uh, things don't even start opening up until like 9 or 10 p.m. a lot of times, on the weekends and stuff. So
Hmm.
that for me at the time, especially for when I first got there, it was phenomenal. I mean, the sunsets are absolutely beautiful. The beach is fun. A
Hmm.
lot of people come there to party, a lot of clubs and a lot of women, and very friendly. And yeah, I had a blast, for a while. But then uh, after a few, I was living in a hotel there that was right on the beach on the 30th floor in the middle of the bay. You could just see amazing, amazing sunsets. Something I've never seen before, like just purples and blues that would like, the whole room would turn colors. And
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, at the time for me, I was having a lot of fun. But after a couple years, I just a year and a half. I just kind of got the idea. I was like, this is not like a good lifestyle. Like what I mean. I wasn't it wasn't a good foundation. I wasn't going to be staying there, and so that was
Hmm.
when I moved down to San Miguel. So, but yeah, but no, I
Also a
mean
decent
Acapulco's
part of town.
cool. I mean, I don't really like it too much. I think there's better ones. A lot of people go to Puerto Vallarta. A lot of people go to places around Cancun. Playa del Carmen is a popular place for beaches. Puerto Escondido, it's cool. I like Sayulita. We usually go to Sayulita actually, um, and
Hmm.
so yeah, I think there's better options. But another thing about you said that I missed the beach. I used to live directly on the beach, and I would hear so in Acapulco they have big waves and a
Yeah.
rocky shore, and so you would just hear like big giant waves 24 hours that I could hear from my room. And so like no, I was like so I mean I heard waves nonstop for years, and I was like I just wanted to get away from that sound. It was just like in my head.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah. But I did used
uh,
to love like in the afternoon when the sun was going down, I could just go and take my shoes off and go running on the beach, every afternoon, eat a
mhm.
fresh coconut, some fresh fish or something like that, and it's just really healthy, way of life.
Yeah, I lived for a long time in Playa del Carmen and loved it. Good digital nomad community, lots of online entrepreneurs. Was ultimately getting a bit bored of Quintana Roo. Um, so decided to do like a really big tour of the Pacific side. So I went to Vallarta, went to Sayulita, went to Mazatlan for the Carnival, took the ferry to La Paz, spent some time in La Paz, Cabo San Lucas, San Jose de Cabo. So definitely loving the sunsets on the Pacific side. I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
Definitely trying to go down to Manzanillo and Acapulco and Zihuatanejo in the near future. Kind of complete the complete the whole set,
Yeah.
basically.
Cool, man.
Yeah. Cool. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to cover. I know that we wanted to talk a bit about healthcare, which is one of your main businesses now, and it's really smart, man. This is something that I thought of a lot, which is like as the percentage of people working online grows, amount of digital nomads grows, people are going to be, and it's like what services can we provide to this increasingly large group of remote workers, and healthcare is one of the biggest ones. And so you have companies like Safety Wing, Nomad Insurance, something like that. So yeah, tell us a little bit about the healthcare business that you started and some of the healthcare concerns that expats and digital nomads should be aware of.
Okay. So first of all, there's two things that people need to know. There's long term, short term policies. Okay, so short term, uh, it also is like emergency. You can call it emergency insurance, and that's for usually a year or 6 months, something like that, or less. Just for one trip, and it covers you for emergencies or things that happen to you. Maybe it also covers a lot of times if you miss your flight or lose your luggage and things like that. These are not made to be lived on. That's what I think a lot of people don't understand, is that they think you're just going to be on this travel insurance forever. But the problem is that
Mhm.
every time that you renew your travel insurance, which you have to, then everything that happened to you prior to that renewal is considered a pre-existing condition. So the whole idea with long-term insurance is that you buy it when you're healthy and you don't have any problems, and then as long as you keep paying your premium with that company, then you are covered for anything that happens, right? So they have to cover you for the rest of your life for any condition that comes up that happens to you. So if you do not have long-term coverage and say you get into something that really screws up your leg and you need like therapy for years and years, that's never going to be covered. There are conditions that you can get, several conditions, say that you got AIDS or something, you're never going to be able to get insurance again. Okay. Ever. So that's why, it's, when you come down, it's good. You have some emergency insurance in case you get into an accident or something like that. Because a lot of people think everything's cheap in Latin America, and it's true. A lot of things are. You can come down here and do medical tourism, and get your teeth cleaned, get a checkup, get
Yeah.
things like that. But they do have a very robust private and public, parallel system. So you can go to somebody, as long as you have a CURP, which means like if you have a residency, then you can go to a public hospital and they're going to treat you. But I mean, I wouldn't recommend it. You know what I mean? I usually recommend people like go, if you plan on that being what you're planning on doing, go sit in a hospital and see what the place is like. Because I'm telling you, when you see it, you're not going to think this is the place you need to get surgery or, whatever. We just kind of consider like a MASH unit that, maybe if you just need some stitches or something. But the thing is that here in Mexico, they have an amazing private care system. So they have amazing private hospitals, state of the art, and all that kind of stuff. But that can get expensive very quickly. Like I said, a lot of people think everything is cheap, but if a lot of times if you have a heart attack, it can get over $100,000 within a few days very quickly. Or you get, we had someone that got emphysema. It was like $70,000 within 4 days. Things like that can get very expensive very quickly. And it's great care, but they want to get paid. See, the thing is that the private hospitals, if you can't pay, they'll basically just kick you out on the street. So, in the U.S., you can go to any hospital and they'll just hand you an astronomical bill. Well, that's not the case here. Here, you have to show that you can pay, and if you can't pay, then they just kick you out. So, if that's why it's good to have, if you have your card, if you have some sort of coverage, you show it to the hospital if anything happens, and they're going to pay it directly to the hospital, so you're not going to get kicked out. Also, if anything that's going to cost a lot of money, say that you need to go back to the hospital for cancer treatments or something like that, then that's going to get very expensive. And then it's basically, somebody relatively young, you can get it for I don't know, $1 or $2 grand a year, and then that's going to be long-term coverage. That's going to be global and is going to follow you anywhere in the world. And then that you're just going to have coverage for the rest of your life as long as you continue to pay that premium.
Global is definitely good because these, American plans that don't extend south of the border, that's
Yeah.
definitely not ideal.
Yeah, and they have them that will cover you in the U.S. Or not. It depends. If you don't need any U.S. coverage, there are less expensive plans, but a lot of them will go anywhere. So, say you're in Mexico, but 10 years you decide you want to go to Spain, you can use the same policy. And the 10 years after that, maybe you want to spend some more time in the U.S. or you want to go to Argentina, whatever. Then you can have one long-term policy that's going to cover you in all those places.
Nice. And so are you a broker for a different company or you started your own company doing this?
I'm a broker for a larger MGA.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you work specifically with expats and foreigners?
It mostly just can't be U.S. residents.
Okay.
Yeah, because every company I work with is not Affordable Care Act compliant. So if you're a U.S. resident, you have to buy it within the Affordable Care Act plans,
Gotcha.
which are like drastically more expensive.
Gotcha. And then James, I guess just as we're wrapping up, I think I read that, this uh, traveler insurance has grown a lot in the past couple of years, and then I'm guessing probably the real estate business in San Miguel and in Mexico has been growing a lot in the past couple of years. Could you just comment on kind of what you've seen in the past 2 years as the world has changed for what you do?
Yeah, honestly, it's it's been pretty much like San Miguel has always kind of been on the radar for a lot of foreigners that want to come down, and so there's been ups and downs in real estate. Um, it's doing pretty good now, but I wouldn't say that it's like way better than it was, say, 5 years ago or something like that. I mean, there have been problems, like obviously when the beginning of 2020, it's pretty much dead. But it's been pretty steadily up. There's a lot of growth here in San Miguel, which a lot of people don't like, but it's still 100,000 people, something like that. Very colonial. They're building a giant mall across the highway here with a Walmart and all kinds of stuff, and that's the kind of stuff that a lot of people like. They like especially the locals. They like the more kind of colonial and rural feel. So I mean, it's changing for the better or worse. It's happening. So, but yeah, the real estate market's pretty good here. It's always been pretty good, and a lot of people moving down. A lot of Canadians I've had that were trying to get out of Canada over the last year. Tons of Canadians. So yeah, it's chugging along.
What's the split been between Canadians, Americans, and other foreigners, i.e., Europeans?
With me, it's mostly, I guess I could say like 30 Canadians right now, 30% Canadians, 40% Americans, and well, maybe not, maybe less. I mean, I do get some Europeans and Australians and stuff like that, but not that many.
So mostly maybe about like 50-50 Canadians, Americans almost,
Yeah,
or
yeah, but
45,
then I get
something
maybe
like that.
10 or 15% others.
Right. 45-10.
Yeah,
I know Ajijic on Lake Chapala near me
yeah.
in Jalisco is another really big spot for retiring expats. In terms of like inland cities in Mexico, Ajijic and San Miguel are the first two that come to mind for retiring expats. Merida as well. What would you say are there any other like top cities in Mexico that are sort of hot spots for retiring expats, and any like up and coming retirement destinations in Mexico?
Well, obviously, the biggest city is Mexico City for foreigners in general, just mostly because of jobs and things like that. But most of the foreigners that live here live in Mexico City just because it's by far the biggest city. Where you are, Guadalajara is also very popular with people, and Ajijic, like you mentioned, Ajijic is a very old population. I don't imagine probably 10 years it's going to be such a big expat community. I guess we'll see because a lot of them are just going to be dying off, I think. And all right, in all seriousness, and San Miguel also has a lot of retirees here. Older population, but there are also younger people here, so it's not all that. Especially now that a lot more people can work online remotely and stuff like that. There've been a lot of young professionals and stuff moving here. Puerto Vallarta has been extremely popular the last couple of years. I've noticed a lot of people have been wanting to move there, and I mean it's nice. It's a nice place, so I can see why. Again, I mentioned Sayulita. San Pancho is another place there by Sayulita that people like to go. Sayulita's a little more touristy. Gets very packed on weekends and holidays. Oaxaca City, a lot of people like. Puerto Escondido is in Oaxaca as well.
Mhm.
And it's kind of a different vibe, but it's again kind of smaller, kind of like San Miguel and Colonial. You mentioned Merida. Merida's nice. A lot of people complain about the heat there. It's very hot and humid. So, but it is a metropolitan city, and that whole area there of Tulum, Playa del Carmen. You can kind of Cancun. You can mesh them all together. They're all pretty close, and somebody could go there and find out what they like. better. Um, I think the big rise in number of people going to Tulum is kind of alarming, and it's not great because the infrastructure is not made for all those people, and it's uh, I don't think it can handle many more people. I mean, the the sewer system and the electricity grid and all that stuff. I mean, they got a lot of the hotels and stuff running off generators, and uh, anyways, we'll see over the next few years how that is. But that's a very popular place for people to go.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, here in I would consider San Miguel de Allende. Guanajuato is very close. Guanajuato is the capital of the state, Guanajuato, which is San Miguel is
Mm-hmm.
located in. And also within about 45 minutes to an hour away is Querétaro. Querétaro is a larger city. A lot of expats have liked that place. They've been moving there lately. I'm not a big
Mm-hmm.
fan of Querétaro. I mean, I go there if there's something I need there because it's a much bigger city. They've been a
Right.
lot more strict and compliant with the COVID measures. So yeah, still like 90% of people running around in Querétaro with masks on and stuff. So you don't really see that here. So yeah, so yeah, I would say that that's the rundown of a lot of the big options, unless I'm missing some. But yeah, I think those are a lot of the ones that people go to.
Yep, that about echoes my thoughts on it. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get out there. I hear about San Miguel a lot. I hear everyone from Leon and the surrounding region, they come into San Miguel to party on weekends as well.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
um, awesome. Well, James, man, you've been super generous with your time. We basically just hit like the 90-minute mark. Um, so we'll get to closing out. So before we go, do you have any uh, announcements or things you want to promote, share with the audience?
Yeah, not really any announcements, but I do have a link, and that's my name, James Guzman .com. And there that has a link to the Borderless Health Insurance, Borderless Blog, my YouTube channel, and you can also schedule if you did want to schedule some sort of a consultation or something. You can do it directly from that link, and so it kind of has all my stuff there. Whatever you're looking for, it's just jamesguzman.com.
Awesome, man. And yeah, just wanted to thank you again for, everything you've given to the community. Like I said, your podcast was early on helping me to put me on the trajectory that I am on today. Help sort of, it was like your podcast and like Travel with the Boss by Johnny FD and the
Travel like a
Tropical
boss. Yeah.
MBA. Yeah,
Tropical MD.
and
Yeah.
Tropical MBA with Dan Andrews.
Dan Andrews. Yeah.
And those were kind of like the big three that they were like the only ones that existed like 5-7 years ago, and
Yep.
they kind of just helped sort of like open up the digital nomad world and everything. So yeah, you definitely kind of got your place in history. So I'm doing my best here to to help solidify that for you.
Cool, man. I appreciate that. I'm glad that helped you.
Awesome. So again, my guest today has been James Guzman of the Borderless Podcast, jamesguzman.com. Another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. James, thanks for joining me, man.